So I've been using the ON XDM1241 for a while now. This is a really great cheap benchtop multimeter. But this meter here caught my eye. This is the Mr. Yang YS4470. So this meter is in the $80 range. It's about 70 bucks with 10 bucks shipping. And honestly, most of the reason I wanted to try this one is because number one, it allows you to connect it to the PC. I'm hoping that means we can get some sort of display in OBS, and you can also mount this thing to basically anything. And in my case, I want to mount it to my microscope. So with my Gorilla microscope, I have this bracket on the back that I can mount things to, because as of right now, I have my ON sort of shoved in the back here. And with my new optical scope setup, it is kind of annoying to get over to press buttons on. So it'd be really cool to have something, you know, a little bit more accessible. So I got this as well, which is, I believe, a mount for this thing. And this has two little ball sockets on the end. I'll have a link to this in the description, as well as a link for the meter itself. So first of all, this thing is really thin. It's like a nice little touchpad, I think. So I'm very curious to see, this is sick. This is so small. I'm very curious to see how nice this is to actually use. So you can power this thing, I believe, with USB-C. We also have a USB-C port labeled charge detection in. I wonder if this is for this functionality here. We also have an input here for the bench power supply, which is cool, and I'm interested to see how that works. And our multimeter probes can go here. We also have some USB outputs. So yeah, anyways, it's a nice little small form factor. Looks like it comes with some banana jack leads, which is great. Oh, and it actually comes with its own little mount. I didn't realize this. So maybe this is actually going to be nicer to use than this big arm here, but I guess we'll have some options in the very least. One of the really cool features of this is in order to monitor current draw in a little bit of a more useful way, this is actually going to graph the changes in current draw for us, which I think is going to be extremely useful for switch repair, even if it doesn't actually work better than this as a multimeter. Being able to visualize current draws over time on motherboards is going to be extremely useful in order to compare a graph of a working board to a graph of a non-functional board. And hopefully this just takes 5 volts in here and we can get this thing powered on. There we go. It's powering up. Okay, so I think this is touchscreen, but I'm going to try to go to settings here and see if we can change this to English. Great. We have an English feature and a very loud beep, which we can fortunately actually turn down. That is a phenomenal feature. You can change the volume of the beep. This has an obnoxious beep. If any of you guys have this, you'll know how obnoxious the beep is on this. We also have settings for a voltage alarm. Looks like we can also turn off the sounds that the different keys make. So what if we try some of these power supply features? So main power collect is probably going to be measuring current draw here. Cool, so I have my power supply plugged in here and then my power supply probes plugged in here. I have 4.2 volts enabled on my power supply, and we're gonna see if this measures our current draw. So I'm gonna press on here and okay, cool. So we have 4.2 volts showing up here. Let's press the power button on the console and we are getting a current draw here, which is great. And you can see the console is booting. It looks like we have different ranges here, so I can put this at 2.4 amps. So like it's only going to be going in the red zone here. If we are pulling a lot of current, that would indicate, you know, a short on the board or something. In this case, I think this range makes more sense. Let's try the little graph. I think this is going to be a graph over time of current draw. This is more interesting to me. I'm curious how good the refresh rate of this is. Let's power the console on. Yeah, cool. So we do get a little current graph here, and you can see it just bumped up. This is the first stage boot of the switch. This is second stage boot, and you can see we're going to see it go into sleep mode. And it's going to pull more like, you know, 50 milliamps or something like that, or 5 milliamps rather. So we'll see this go down right there. So that's where the console is in sleep mode. And then I can power this on again. And then you can see we're back powered up, pulling our normal 300 to 400 milliamps. So this is pretty cool. You can see all the different stages, and I do like the refresh rate. It is definitely useful. So let's go to high speed here. Okay, so this is just increasing the speed of the graph. Let's turn this off and see what other options we have. So I can click save curve. I don't know what that's going to do. Reference curve. Let's try powering this on again. So maybe it's using the last curve that you saved as a reference, and then this is comparing the working board to a non-functional board or one that you're working on. Interesting. So as soon as it detects current draw from the console, it immediately starts up the reference curve. That's kind of cool. Let's click this run button here. Okay, so you can pause it if you want to just pause the graph and inspect it. Looks like you can also look through the history, which is cool. That's nice. We can clear it. So I think out of all of the features, this is actually the most useful feature that this thing has. Let's see if we can plug this thing into the computer and if we can get a display, because this would be really useful to someone who wants a display for their power supply, but their power supply doesn't plug in their computer. So I'm curious if we actually can get some sort of display out of this thing on our PC here. So let me plug this into the PC USB-C port. All right, so I had to find this TikTok in order to figure out how to install the software. It looks like you have to go to the ycswxj.cn site. I'll put a link to this in the description. And then this, I believe, is our download for the multimeter. All right, so we have the actual app open here. And I noticed that if you spam click this little box, you can figure out that one of these is English, even though they're both showing up as black. So this is how you switch the language here. I also noticed you don't actually need to have the 5 volts plugged in. You can just have the PC plugged in, and it's enough to power the multimeter as well as, connect it to the PC software. So this is super sick because we can have a power supply display even if you don't have a power supply that you can plug into the PC. This gives you a little pass through for your power supply, so you can have not only a current draw on screen, but you can also have the graph of the current draw, and even a multimeter on screen. This is really well implemented. I'm really impressed with this software. So if I plug in a switch now, and yeah, cool. So this actually looks better with the 0.7 amp current range. I like that. We can pause and navigate. Ah, cool. Okay. When you switch, that was really cool. When you switch the function on the actual unit itself, for example, if I go home and go to the main power collect, yeah, it switches automatically. If we look at the meter and I click on the computer, the multimeter, you can see it switches automatically to that. This is probably one of the best software implementations that I've ever seen for a Chinese tool from AliExpress. It works very seamlessly between the computer and the meter itself. And this is going to be really nice for people who want an on-screen display and don't want to spend, more than $200 for a multimeter or a bench power supply. And this actually gives you an on-screen display for both. So let me try mounting this thing now onto my microscope, because I'm curious if that is going to be a convenient way to use this thing. Cool, so you guys can see I'm able to mount this directly to my scope using the little arm. The smaller arm does fit. It's just a little finicky to get it far enough away from the scope for it to be comfortably mounted. But I like where this is, honestly, because even if I'm not using the scope, I can move this out of the way and still have the meter right next to me here. So this is actually like much better placement for my meter, whether I'm using the scope or not using the scope. Let's check the multimeter function. This is something I'm really interested in. So we're in voltage range now, and it's an auto ranging, and let's see how fast this is. So I'm going to test the charge on this battery here. So we have, yeah, that's pretty fast, 3.8 volts there. And then here we're also getting 3.8 on VSys. So we should get like 0.6 here. Yep. Then we've got 3.3 here. Cool. So that works pretty good. What is this record function? Let's give that a shot. I'm curious what that is. So if I measure a voltage here. Cool. Okay, so it recorded that. This is kind of cool. So it keeps track of which rails you've already measured. Okay, let's clear this. Looks like we can go to AC mode as well if we want. Then we can go here to resistance mode. And I'm very curious how these probes show up on this meter here. Okay, this is showing 0. So we're not actually getting the resistance of the meter leads, which is kind of strange. Like if we go to resistance mode on here, we're going to actually see the resistance of the meter probes themselves. And you can see in this case, we are getting a 0.06 ohm reading of resistance on these leads themselves. These wires have resistance inherently, but this is just going all the way down to 0. I don't really like that. I'm wondering if this is going to show us a low resistance reading. So like if I try to measure this here, which is a rail on the SoC, that should be around 10 ohms. I'm curious, like, do we even, okay, so we get 15 ohms. That's pretty slow though. Maybe we can try this high speed option. Is that going to work? Okay, I don't know how much faster that actually is. To be honest, the resistance mode on the O1 is not all that fast either. The problem is I don't think we're actually getting this extra resolution that it claims that it's giving us. I think it's really just giving us 1 decimal place. I've never seen these other 2 zeros change to anything else. And if I click low range here, we just get no decimal points. So that's not really helpful. So yeah, I don't really know about that feature. Let's check diode mode. So diode mode is my favorite or go-to measurement tool for repairs. I do use resistance mode at times, but diode mode is really what I go to. Oh, and you can see this this does give us 3 decimal places for voltage drop in the very least. You can see we're getting 0.001 voltage drop. So it's good that we have that. I think normally I get like a 0.2 reading on 1.8. So out of curiosity, if we plug this in to here, this is why I always am telling you guys to take your own diode mode readings, because if I check this exact same line here, you can see I get 0.28 voltage drop. That's a big difference between what this meter reads and what this meter reads. So I recommend taking your own notes with your own meter and your own leads for diode mode to compare to on a working board. It helps you find faults faster than, if you just go off of someone else's notes online, because they're going to have a different meter that reads differently. We also have this buzzer option. I'm curious. Okay, actually, it looks like, interestingly enough, our beep volume doesn't work unless we turn on the key sound. That is a little bit of an oversight. And now, yes, so now we get a beep and it's a little bit delayed. So like if I take this off now, it continues to beep for 2 seconds even after I let go. What about a small beep when we just attach it here? That's nice. Okay, I do like that. So this gives us a little tiny beep. I don't actually have this on the O1. Just to let us know we're making a good connection. We have charge data collect. I'm wondering if that is charging information from here or here. Oh, interesting. Okay, so let's try this out. I'm thinking we actually have to plug in like a PD charger here. So let me just give that a shot with this. This is my PD charger, and that probably is just a pass through to here. Okay, yeah, that's what this is. So I've got a battery plugged in here now, and this is charging the battery. And I know this is using the input here, the PD input, because this can't supply 14 volts. So this is kind of just like a USB-C ammeter. So yeah, this is not too bad. I like this a lot. I think the only complaint I have is resistance mode, that you can't get lower than 0.1 ohms. But otherwise, I do like how diode mode is implemented. We also might have a firmware upgrade for this thing. So apparently what you got to do is on the back of this thing, you have 2 holes. There's a little button in here and you got to press that in while plugging it into the computer. So it's this hole right here. I'm going to keep that pressed in, and it did actually detect it here. So we can go back to the software. It looks like we only have 2 options here that, again, we can't really see. There's February and March. I'll click upgrade, and it looks like it is at least letting us attempt to upgrade. Cool. So it says upgrade complete. So I think we can unplug this now from the computer and just plug it back in. And we have another option here. So we have fast cont. I don't know what that is. Fast continuity, maybe. I'm going to give this thing a shot longer term and see if I like it over the O1. Being able to use the meter from top down is actually quite nice. I think for the bench power supply leads, I'll just route them all the way back down the microscope arm. So this thing's definitely an interesting little unit. I think I'm going to like having this thing. I got to set up the software so it shows up in OBS for you guys. I have the software pulled in here. So for diode mode, you can see we're getting a nice beep from the meter, a quiet one, thank God. And then we're also seeing the voltage drop up here. So I'm going to put this thing through its paces over the next week and see if I end up liking it. But yeah, as always, I appreciate you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.